Imagine walking through the shadowed corridors of a palace, where silence hides screams, and every gilded chamber conceals secrets the world was never meant to see. Here, power is absolute, obedience is demanded, and bodies young, beautiful, and innocent are tools in a game of ritual, control, and domination. What looks like splendor is built on suffering, and every corner of this empire hides stories too dark to be whispered in polite company. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have uncovered fragments of these hidden truths, yet much remains buried, censored, or misunderstood. In this journey, we peel back the layers of history, exploring a civilization obsessed with beauty, fertility, obedience, and secrecy, a world where human endurance was tested and survival became the quietest form of rebellion. Imagine you are the royal physician in a palace so vast it swallows the sun at noon. The hallways stretch like tunnels of gold and shadow, incense smoke curling into dizzying spirals above your head. Every corridor hums with whispers, the scrape of sandals, and muffled sobs that vanish behind painted doors. In this place, beauty is not merely admired, it is a weapon, a form of currency, a mandate enforced with fear and steel. And tonight, it has summoned you. The messenger bows, trembling, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. Her Majesty, the Emperor's concubine, awaits your presence, he whispers. You already know the weight of this summons. Concubines are more than companions. They are instruments of dynastic ambition, vessels for heirs, and subjects of endless experimentation. Illness is not a private misfortune here. A faltering body threatens the throne, and a faltering woman can vanish under the shadow of silence or worse, the edge of your blade. You step into the concubine's chamber. The door, carved with serpents and lions, seems alive, writhing in the flickering torchlight. She sits on a velvet chaise, her eyes wide with fear and resignation. Her hands tremble, but not as much as her pulse, which you have been trained to read, as if it were the rhythm of the entire empire. She has heard the tales young women summoned for treatment who returned changed, mutilated, or never returned at all. Each story is a warning etched in palace walls, a whisper in the dark, a promise that mercy is conditional and rare. The Emperor's court believes in medicine, but their definition of healing is entwined with obedience and spectacle. Every potion you mix, every incision you make, every herb you grind carries the invisible weight of authority. You are a physician, yes, but also an executor of power. Hesitation is a luxury, and conscience is a dangerous indulgence. Tonight, the concubine suffers from a vague malaise. Perhaps it is fatigue from endless cycles of conception, from nights spent performing the emperor's whims, from the poisons subtly laced into her diet to test endurance. Perhaps it is anxiety, fever, or infection, but in the eyes of the court, she is failing. And failure is a crime in these gilded halls. Before you, the tools of your trade lie gleaming. Jars of powdered herbs, scalpels honed to the point of whispering against flesh, cauldrons bubbling with concoctions that reek of iron and rot. Strips of linen steeped in alchemical chemicals, designed to cleanse and scar alike, await your hands. You know the procedures required are brutal. There is no gentle healing here. The concubine's body is a canvas of obedience, her suffering a measure of your skill, her survival conditional upon the emperor's whim. You breathe in the air heavy with copper, herbs, and fear. You know the palace watches not just through eyes, but through expectation, rumor, and invisible chains. Tonight, medicine and power are inseparable. You will decide what she endures, what is removed, what is enhanced, and what remains to mark her place in this hierarchy. You are both savior and executioner, bound to the rhythms of a palace that values beauty and fertility over life itself. As you step closer, she whispers, a fragile sound drowned in the shadows. Do not harm me more than you must. You want to reassure her, but words are futile here. Your hands will do the talking. Her body, trained to please, trained to endure, now becomes the locus of control, an instrument of dynastic necessity. You will probe, you will cut, you will measure and adjust, guided by protocols that mix science, superstition, and cruelty. And when the night ends, whether she walks from the chamber, broken, or does not walk at all, the palace will remain indifferent. The corridors will echo with laughter, footsteps, and whispers. The emperor will retire to his golden chambers, oblivious to the scars you leave behind. The concubine's suffering is invisible to him. It exists only in the hidden spaces where power meets flesh, and where medicine is both healing and punishment. Because in this empire, concubines are not merely women. They are instruments, experiments, and symbols. Their bodies are territories to be claimed, modified, and sometimes destroyed. Their pain is a testament to obedience, and their survival of fleeting mercy. And you, the physician, stand at the center of it all, wielding knowledge and terror in equal measure. Imagine walking through the private quarters of the imperial palace, where silence is broken only by the faint sobs of women too young to understand their fate. Every concubine here is a lesson in obedience, every gesture measured, every breath regulated by the invisible hand of authority. To be chosen by the emperor is to be elevated beyond ordinary life, but also to be stripped of it. In these halls, women are not individuals. They are property, curated for beauty, molded for fertility, and controlled with a rigor that borders on ritualized terror. The palace physicians keep meticulous records, not of personalities or desires, but of bodies. Measurements, pulses, and responses are cataloged in leather-bound tomes. Skin is inspected as if it were currency. The curve of a neck, the firmness of a wrist, the clarity of the eyes, each a note in the ledger of value. Young concubines are assigned ranks according to their health and beauty, their usefulness to the emperor measured against other women, their worth dictated by the ever-shifting standards of court intrigue. Failure to maintain perfection is a sin punishable not just socially, but physically. Here, the concept of personal autonomy does not exist. When a concubine falls ill, she does not rest. She is summoned, examined, and manipulated like a vessel in need of repair. Her complaints are dismissed, her pain catalogued as symptom, not experience. Herbs are administered in exacting doses, not for comfort, but for compliance. Cauldrons bubble with poisons and stimulants alike, ensuring that bodies bend to the will of the court. Even the simplest ailments, fever, fatigue, irregular cycles become reasons for intervention, opportunities to reinforce the notion that these women exist solely for the emperor's needs. Children born to concubines are not extensions of their mothers, they are strategic assets. From conception, the palace treats their bodies as resources, to be nurtured or discarded, depending on dynastic calculation. Training begins almost immediately. Girls are educated in movement, posture, and obedience. Their bodies honed to attract attention and satisfy expectations. Boys, when permitted, are observed for potential as heirs or courtiers. Every body in the palace is under surveillance, every gesture interpreted, every deviation documented. The emperor's power over these women is absolute, enforced by layers of ritual. Private chambers are staffed with attendants whose sole task is to observe and report. Sleep, meals, and hygiene are regulated. Intimacy is measured, monitored, and commodified. The concubine's body is never hers. It is a living instrument, constantly optimized for political, dynastic, and aesthetic purposes. A woman's value is inseparable from her compliance, her endurance, and the illusion of perfection the court demands. Refusal is not an option. To resist treatment, to defy instruction, risks punishment ranging from corporal pain to social erasure. Physicians, though sworn to heal, are also enforcers. Every incision, potion, and massage is an assertion of ownership. The concubine learns early that autonomy is a myth, and survival is measured by her capacity to surrender. Obedience becomes instinct, fear becomes muscle memory, and compliance is rewarded with temporary reprieve but never freedom. Some concubines are enhanced to amplify beauty or fertility. Scarification, tightening, and herbal infusions are performed under the guise of medicine, but the procedures are brutal. Pain is both tool and measure, a reminder of authority. Many do not survive these interventions. Those who do are marked, physically and psychologically, with the invisible branding of subjugation. The palace transforms bodies into objects of devotion and utility, erasing identity. Even the most intimate acts, sleeping, bathing, sexual performance, are regulated. Physicians observe discreetly, recording reactions and endurance. Rituals of grooming, diet, and exercise are enforced with military precision. Pleasure, when permitted, is calculated. Suffering is normalized. In this system, the line between care and cruelty disappears. The concubine's body is no longer her own. It is property, weapon, and performance piece rolled into one. Every wall in the palace whispers this truth. Women learn it before their first menstrual cycle, before their first audience with the emperor, before they can comprehend that life and death are negotiable in a hierarchy built entirely on obedience. The palace is a world of gold and shadow, but beneath it is a laboratory of control. Flesh is measured, manipulated, and catalogued. The emperor's concubines exist only as instruments of power, and yet they endure. Survival is practice, silent resistance, and a testament to the human body's capacity to withstand horrors it was never meant to endure. Their suffering is unseen beyond palace walls, yet meticulously recorded, studied, and exploited. In this empire, bodies are property, and the concubines are its most tragic, beautiful, and controlled expression. Step into the inner sanctum of the palace, where the air is thick with incense, anxiety, and the unrelenting expectation of progeny. Fertility is not merely desired here, it is demanded. Every heartbeat of the imperial court revolves around the creation of heirs, the continuity of dynasty, and the illusion of divine favor. For the concubines, fertility is both badge and burden, a merciless standard by which their worth is measured. Success brings temporary elevation. Failure brings scrutiny, suspicion, and sometimes death. From the moment a girl enters the palace, her body becomes a vessel for dynastic ambition. Physicians monitor menstrual cycles with the precision of astronomers charting stars. Herbs, tonics, and potions are administered to regulate ovulation, stimulate conception, or quell imagined deficiencies. The concubine is instructed in positions, exercises, and rituals that promise fecundity, yet the instructions are never gentle. Pain, discomfort, and humiliation are woven into these practices, reminders that the palace claims not just obedience, but the surrender of her body to a purpose beyond desire. Pregnancy is celebrated, but only as proof of utility. Every change is observed: the swell of the abdomen, the shift in gait, the tension in limbs. Medical attendants note each symptom, each complication, each sign of weakness. Mothers are monitored even after birth. Breastfeeding, rest, and recovery are not for comfort. They are prescribed for survival, productivity, and the next cycle of conception. Fertility is a continuum, a relentless machine of production. Concubines who fail to conceive are subjected to escalating interventions. Bleeding, purging, and herbal concoctions are combined with physical manipulations designed to correct imagined blockages. Some are placed in isolation chambers, where their bodies endure temperature extremes, mechanical restraints, and ritualized examinations. Every procedure carries the implicit message: your body exists to produce. Your desires, your suffering, your life are secondary to this singular goal. Even anticipation creates tension. The emperor's attentions are measured not by affection, but by reproductive calculation. Nights are scheduled according to lunar cycles, and encounters are timed with the cold precision of science masquerading as intimacy. Pleasure is rarely considered. Submission is mandatory. The concubine's body is mapped, measured, and manipulated for results. Ovulation charts, pulse readings, and physical inspections dictate the rhythm of her days and nights. Any deviation is cause for alarm and intervention. This obsession extends beyond individual bodies. The palace maintains laboratories of fertility, where test tubes, oils, and rare herbs are combined in search of enhancement. Physicians experiment with combinations that risk organ damage, chronic pain, and death. These interventions are justified as necessary for the emperor's heirs, but they reveal the underlying truth. In this court, fertility is not sacred. It is an instrument of control. The concubine becomes both subject and experiment, her body a battlefield where biology and power intersect. Pregnancy complications are met with cold precision. Miscarriage is treated not as grief, but as failure. Conception is monitored like currency. Lost embryos are catalogued as deficits. Women who endure repeated failures are either reassigned, punished, or removed entirely. The palace transforms the most intimate acts into strategic exercises, turning conception into a performance, a ritual, and an obligation. Obedience to reproductive expectations is the ultimate measure of loyalty, endurance, and worth. Even when a concubine succeeds, the cost is ongoing. Continuous cycles of pregnancy, birth, and recuperation leave the body fragile, scarred, and exhausted. Her identity is defined by her ability to produce heirs, and the palace reminds her daily. Clothing, posture, diet, and physical activity are all regulated to maximize reproductive output. The mind is trained to endure, the body conditioned to obey. Autonomy is a distant memory. Survival is measured by the capacity to endure and comply. In this world, fertility becomes both idol and prison. The concubine's body is no longer hers, but an instrument of legacy, dynastic ambition, and imperial obsession. Her pain, hope, and failures are absorbed into the palace ledger, recorded in detail, and exploited as lessons for others. The demand for heirs transforms life itself into ritualized endurance, where every movement, every cycle, and every heartbeat is dictated by the relentless pursuit of continuity. And yet, even in this system, concubines adapt. They learn to navigate expectations, anticipate interventions, and survive cycles of physical and psychological torment. Fertility is their curse, their purpose, and their domain of influence. But it is also the mechanism through which the palace exerts absolute control. In this empire, conception is not a personal miracle. It is an obsession, a performance, and a tool of domination that leaves no body untouched and no spirit unscarred. The moment you step into the chamber, the scent of iron and incense strikes like a warning. Candles flicker along the walls, casting shadows that twist like living things. And the air hums with the anticipation of suffering. Here, in the deepest recesses of the palace, the concubines are reminded that their bodies are never their own. Tonight, the ritual of bloodletting will commence a practice revered as both medicine and ceremony, punishment and purification. Blood is power in this court. It carries life, lineage, and obedience. The emperor believes in its mystical properties, that a measured loss can purge weakness, restore fertility, and realign the body to the rhythms of the empire. For the concubine, it is an ordeal, an intimate violation disguised as care. Physicians prepare their tools meticulously, scalpels honed to razor sharpness, bowls polished to reflect trembling faces, and herbs steeped to slow bleeding or hasten it as required. There is precision in cruelty. Every cut, every drop, every pulse is calculated. The concubine kneels upon a low platform, her wrists bound with silk cords that gleam in the candlelight. Her breathing is shallow, punctuated by the silent prayers she dares not voice aloud. Attendants stand close, recording every detail: the color of her blood, the speed of its flow, the quiver in her hands. In this palace, observation is an extension of authority. Nothing escapes the ledger. The concubine's very essence is quantified, and the consequences of imperfection are severe. Physicians work in concert with ritual. Bloodletting is never a simple act of medicine. It is choreographed. One hand steadies, another slices, a third holds aloft a talisman, invoking protection, fertility, or divine favor. Pain is integral. It sharpens awareness, reinforces obedience, and reminds the concubine of her place. Some endure quietly, others cry, but all are marked by the ordeal. The palace takes note of who falters, whose veins betray weakness, and whose body bends entirely to its will. The process is relentless. Veins are opened along the arms, neck, and occasionally thighs, channels of life forced to flow under the watchful eyes of the emperor's attendants. Warm blood pools in ceremonial basins, sometimes infused with herbs to preserve its supposed potency. The concubine's body becomes both instrument and offering, her suffering a testament to the authority of the court. Each drop is a lesson. Defiance is invisible only when submission is absolute. Some concubines are subject to experimental bloodletting. Physicians mix tonics and potions with the blood, seeking enhancements to beauty, strength, or fertility. These procedures are risky, often leaving scars, infection, or permanent weakness. Yet no complaint is tolerated. The palace dictates that survival is proof of worth, and injury is merely another mark of obedience. Pain is both punishment and pedagogy, and every bruise is an emblem of the hierarchy that governs life within these walls. The ritual extends beyond physical suffering. Concubines are instructed to meditate, recite prayers, or imagine the emperor's favor while their blood flows. Mind and body are inseparable. Discipline is holistic. Any hesitation, any sign of fear is documented. Reports are sent to the highest chambers of the court, ensuring that the emperor is informed not only of results, but of compliance. Blood, in this sense, is currency, payment for survival, evidence of loyalty, and proof of obedience. By the end, exhaustion settles over the chamber. The concubine's limbs tremble, her vision blurs, and her pulse is a faint echo of life itself. Physicians withdraw, cleansing tools and recording final measurements. The ritual has ended, yet the lesson lingers. In the palace, the body is never merely flesh. It is a ledger, a symbol, a testament to the power wielded over it. Outside the chamber, life continues as though nothing has happened. The corridors echo with laughter, the emperor's footsteps, and the hushed whispers of those awaiting their turn. But within, the concubine bears the invisible mark of the ritual. Her body remembers every cut, every pang, every obedient breath. In this empire, blood is not just medicine, it is control. Each ritual reinforces the unyielding truth. The concubine exists for the palace, her life measured in obedience, her body a canvas for authority, her suffering both lesson and legacy. The first thing you notice is the smell bitter, pungent, metallic, and it hangs in the air like a warning. Shelves line the walls, stacked with jars of dried roots, crushed leaves, and powders whose names are whispered only in fear. In the imperial palace, herbs are not simple remedies. They are instruments of control, tools of transformation, and sometimes instruments of torment. Tonight you, the court physician, will administer a concoction meant to enhance a concubine's body. But you know better. These mixtures are cruel experiments disguised as care. The concubine kneels before your table, her hands trembling. She has been here before, yet no familiarity brings comfort. The palace has conditioned her to obey without question, yet fear pulses beneath her skin. Each jar you lift, each root you crush, carries potential for healing or for devastation. The emperor trusts in the efficacy of these treatments, believing that the right combination of herbs can ensure fertility, beauty, obedience, and strength. What he does not know, or perhaps chooses to ignore, is the human cost hidden in every leaf, every drop, every pinch of powder. Some herbs are benign, merely bitter stimulants or digestive aids. Others are more insidious, roots that induce bleeding, seeds that cause vomiting, and oils that inflame the skin or disturb sleep are all used with precision. The concubine's body becomes a test subject. Each reaction is catalogued, each tremor and shiver noted in leather-bound tomes. Failure to respond correctly is not merely a medical concern. It is a mark of inadequacy, a sign of weakness, a reason for punishment. The ritual begins. Hot water steams from a brass cauldron as powders are mixed into a thick, acrid paste. The concubine is instructed to drink, apply, or inhale the mixture. Each method carries risks. Internal concoctions can scald or poison, topical pastes can blister or scar, and fumes can induce hallucinations or fainting. Pain is inevitable, and endurance is mandatory. In the palace, suffering is not incidental. It is proof that the body can be molded, that obedience can be tested, that power can be imposed. Even the most innocent-seeming herbs are treacherous. Some accelerate fertility but damage the liver or kidneys. Others improve skin texture but weaken bones. A handful can induce fevers that mimic illness, allowing physicians to manipulate treatments further. The concubine's body becomes a ledger of experiments, Pulse readings, skin reactions, and digestive responses all recorded meticulously. Every ounce of her endurance is measured. Every tear, a data point in a system that values results over humanity. Herbal horrors are not limited to the living body. Some mixtures are designed to prepare the concubine for the emperor's inspection, temporarily enhancing appearance or scent, masking weakness or illness. The effect is often short-lived, leaving women exhausted, nauseous, or trembling. The cycle repeats daily or weekly, ensuring that compliance and suffering intertwine. The palace has no interest in comfort, only in outcomes. The concubine's mind suffers as much as her body. Hallucinations, tremors, and nausea erode focus and self-control. Obedience becomes instinct, fear becomes muscle memory, and endurance is rewarded with temporary reprieve. Each herbal experiment reinforces the unyielding message: your body is not yours. It belongs to the emperor, to the court, to the rituals, to the treatments, to survival itself. Some concubines do not survive these regimens. The weakest, the unlucky, the defiant are removed quietly, their absence noted in reports as a cautionary tale for others. The palace continues without interruption. The herbs, however, remain a silent arsenal of authority, a chemical language of domination. The physician becomes both healer and enforcer, a conduit for power wielded through pain, manipulation, and careful observation. By the end of the session, the concubine's body is marked by the ordeal: paleness from vomiting, flushes from stimulants, faint bruises from massage, and lingering nausea from ingestion. She leaves the chamber changed, conditioned, and reminded of her place. Survival is temporary, obedience is permanent, and the cycle will repeat. Within these walls, herbs are more than medicine. They are instruments of terror, perfection, and control. The palace thrives on this system. Women endure, bodies bend, spirits fracture, and authority remains absolute. Herbs are the silent enforcers, recording compliance and punishing deviation. The concubine learns that submission is safety, that endurance is currency, and that in this empire, botanical science serves tyranny as often as it serves healing. Every leaf crushed, every potion brewed, every bitter sip is a testament to the palace's relentless obsession with controlling flesh, enforcing obedience, and exacting suffering in the name of beauty, fertility, and power. The palace corridors are silent, except for the faint, almost imperceptible sobs of women whose bodies belong to the state. Among them, concubines walk a perilous line. To bear children for the emperor is duty, yet their bodies are also instruments of control, and control demands experimentation. Fertility is desired, but only at the emperor's discretion. When the court decides a child is inconvenient, unwanted, or politically risky, violence becomes method surgical, chemical, ritualistic. Contraception in the imperial court is no quiet affair. Herbs are chosen with lethal precision: crushed seeds, bitter roots, potent leaves that induce sterility, disrupt cycles, or poison the womb. These concoctions are administered under the guise of treatment, a potion to balance humors or restore health. The concubine drinks obediently, knowing refusal invites suspicion, punishment, or death. Each swallow carries uncertainty: temporary illness, permanent damage, or fatality. Obedience is measured not in gratitude, but survival. Abortive measures are darker still. When pregnancy is deemed inconvenient, physicians are summoned to act swiftly and secretly. Mechanical interventions, herbal cauldrons, and ritual manipulations converge on a single goal: termination by any means necessary. The concubine lies on cold slabs, restrained by attendants whose hands are steady and unyielding. Each procedure is performed clinically, yet the pain is unimaginable. Screams are suppressed by ritual, by fear, by the knowledge that suffering is expected, required. Some herbs induce contractions so violent the body can scarcely endure. Others are administered as suppositories, forcing the uterus into submission. The concubine is patient and instrument, a vessel for experimentation. Physicians catalog every reaction: pulse, color, temperature, response to herbal concoctions, and compare them to records of those who survived or perished. Survival is not mercy, it is data. Compliance is measured in endurance, and endurance is rewarded with temporary reprieve, but never freedom. The palace views these acts as medical necessity, yet they are exercises in dominance. Each intervention reinforces hierarchy. The emperor controls life and death. The physician wields authority through pain, and the concubine learns that her body is expendable, her suffering essential, her autonomy non-existent. Conceiving without permission is punished. Refusing treatment is dangerous. Enduring pain mandatory. Morality is defined by obedience, not compassion. Survival is inseparable from compliance. Even the youngest concubines are not spared. Girls newly brought to the palace are monitored for menstruation, and early pregnancies are managed with ritualistic ruthlessness. Failure to conform invites immediate intervention. Chemical agents, physical manipulation, and enforced rest in isolation chambers are combined, ensuring every womb is a controlled instrument of dynastic policy. Pain, humiliation, and fear intertwine, shaping the body into compliance before she understands her reproductive power. Some concubines endure repeated interventions, their bodies marked with scars, bruises, and internal trauma. The psychological toll is profound. Anxiety becomes instinct, dread becomes reflex, and the thought of pregnancy induces panic. Yet the palace rewards endurance. A surviving concubine is temporarily permitted to resume duties, to be summoned again, to obey once more. Every intervention leaves traces physical and mental that remind her of her place, vulnerability, and the emperor's absolute authority. These practices are systematic. The palace maintains records, experiments, and hierarchies of fertility control, designed to ensure children are conceived only when sanctioned, destroyed when undesirable. Life and death are determined not by nature, but by political calculus. The concubine's womb is a battlefield, the herb a weapon, and the physician both executioner and analyst. In this empire, reproductive violence is normalized, ritualized, hidden beneath the veneer of medicine. The concubines endure because survival is compliance. Pain is instruction, endurance obedience, fertility never personal. It is a tool of power. Conception and termination are performance, each act testament to the emperor's authority and the concubine's subjugation. Every suppressed scream, trembling body, and coerced choice reinforces the brutal calculus of dynastic control. Here, in quiet chambers and shadowed laboratories, the truth is absolute. In this palace, bodies are not sovereign, wombs are not private, life itself subordinate to unrelenting power. Fertility is obsession, contraception, a weapon, abortion, demonstration of control, and the concubines endure, marking the human cost of an empire built on obedience, manipulation, and ruthless regulation of life itself. The palace mirrors reflect perfection, but only on the surface. Behind every flawless cheek, every elegant gesture, there is pain meticulously hidden, a private theater of suffering performed for the emperor's approval. In this world, beauty is not merely aesthetic, it is a weapon, a symbol, a currency. And like every weapon in the palace, it is honed with violence, ritual, and precision. The concubine learns quickly. To be beautiful is to endure pain disguised as care. Every morning begins with ritualized grooming. Attendants, trained in the delicate arts of manipulation, administer treatments that are at once cosmetic and torturous. Oils infused with caustic minerals are rubbed into the skin, designed to illuminate the face but strip away resilience. Hair is pulled, styled, and stretched into impossible forms. Nails are hardened with chemicals that blister fingers and toes. Each procedure is cataloged, not for pleasure or artistry, but for data. How much endurance can the body tolerate? How much suffering can the mind suppress before rebellion arises? Corsets, bindings, and intricate garments are more than fashion, they are instruments of control. Bones are compressed into elegant curves, ribs pushed into unnatural shapes, hips and waists constrained until the body itself obeys aesthetic dictates. Pain is normalized. Blisters, bruises, and fainting are considered marks of success rather than injury. The concubine's reflection becomes both teacher and tormentor. Every movement, every posture, Every subtle expression must demonstrate submission. Perfection is performance. Disobedience is visibly marked in the skin. Even adornments carry cruelty. Jewelry is sharpened, pins hidden beneath layers of silk to pierce and bruise. Headdresses weigh heavy on the skull, forcing endurance of chronic headaches in silence. Perfumes are concocted from volatile substances that blister the nostrils and throat. Each enhancement is a double-edged blade. It attracts favor but punishes. It elevates beauty but enforces suffering. The concubine internalizes this paradox. Her appeal is inseparable from her pain. Her allure inseparable from endurance. Physicians and beauty attendants collaborate closely. Treatments blend medicine and torment. Skin is scarified to create delicate patterns. Ointments inflict burns that are carefully monitored. Herbs alter pigmentation and texture, but often cause nausea, seizures, or worse. Some concubines are injected with mysterious fluids promising youth or radiance, while their bodies react violently. Each reaction is meticulously recorded, a ledger of endurance, a testament to obedience. The body is no longer owned by the woman herself. It is catalogued, experimented upon, and displayed as both art and evidence. Failure to conform has immediate consequences. A bruise too dark, a posture too lax, a contour deemed imperfect. These trigger corrective interventions. Floggings may be administered under the guise of ritual purification. Limbs may be manipulated until sinews protest. Hunger is prescribed to tighten waists, thirst to sharpen focus. Each punishment is framed as preparation, a reminder that beauty is obedience made visible. Physical agony and social control intertwine, teaching the concubine that suffering is not accidental. It is essential, intentional, and absolute. Yet the paradox of palace beauty is psychological as well as physical. Mirrors and mirrors of mirrors create self-surveillance. The concubine studies her own reflection with meticulous scrutiny, learning to anticipate the court's judgment, to endure in private what will be demanded in public. Anxiety becomes muscle memory. Fear becomes posture. Obedience manifests in every tilt of the head, every gesture of the hand, every measured step across mosaic floors. Her body becomes a map of compliance, her beauty a ledger of pain endured, her endurance a silent declaration of survival. Even the most intimate acts, bathing, resting, performing for the emperor, are extensions of this cruelty. Every glance, every scent, every movement is assessed. Pleasure is rare, pain normalized, suffering institutionalized. The concubine internalizes the truth. Her body exists for display, for evaluation, and for the relentless pursuit of aesthetic supremacy dictated by the court. Her identity becomes inseparable from endurance, her beauty inseparable from torment. And so, the palace transforms flesh into ornament, obedience into art, and agony into currency. Behind every crowned hairstyle, every flawless cheek, every delicate hand, lies a history of torture disguised as devotion. The concubine endures, silent, invisible, measured, and catalogued. Beauty here is not luxury, it is domination, performance, and the ultimate instrument of control, honed to perfection through suffering. The palace operating chamber smells of copper, oil, and anticipation. Here, the concubine is no longer a woman. She is a subject, a specimen, a canvas for the emperor's vision of perfection and the physician's unrestrained curiosity. Curtains are drawn, attendants hover, and the air vibrates with a tension that presses down on the chest like a physical weight. Every incision, every measurement, every procedure is both medical and symbolic, a demonstration of control over flesh, obedience, and fate. Surgical experiments are routine, yet they are cloaked in secrecy and ritual. Physicians approach their subjects with a dual purpose, to heal but also to transform. A concubine's body might be altered for beauty, for fertility, for stamina, or for some obscure theory of health devised by an imperial decree. No area is off limits. The chest, the abdomen, the womb, even the face, all become territories of precision and pain. Each cut is catalogued, each reaction observed, and each survival logged as proof of mastery. Before surgery begins, The concubine is prepared with substances that dull, distort, or heighten sensation. Some are sedatives, herbal brews that cloud consciousness. Others are stimulants, designed to keep her body reactive to testing. Physicians record not only physical response, but emotional reaction, as if endurance itself is a measurable vital sign. The concubine lies strapped to a cold slab, her limbs bound, her eyes wide with fear and resignation. Every heartbeat is a countdown. Every shiver is noted. The instruments gleam, terrifying in their precision. Scalpels, hooks, needles, and drills, all designed to manipulate the body beyond natural limits. Physicians operate like artists, sculptors, or executioners, moving with a meticulous choreography that transforms horror into ritual. Some surgeries are corrective, tightening muscles, repositioning organs, or excising perceived imperfections. Others are experimental, insertion of foreign substances to enhance fertility, incision patterns intended to increase stamina, or testing herbal injections that might alter the body permanently. Success is measured in survival, failure in silence or disappearance. Every experiment carries a lesson in obedience. The concubine cannot flinch, cry, or resist without consequence. Pain is both diagnostic and disciplinary. Physicians whisper instructions, attendants steady limbs, and the emperor's unseen gaze looms as an omnipotent authority. Even survival is conditional. The body is only permitted to live if it conforms, adapts, and yields. Those who fail are removed from records or buried quietly, their absence a warning to others. Some experiments are grotesque in their ambition. Flesh may be removed, reshaped, or scarified to test healing, reaction, or endurance. Internal organs may be probed or manipulated in pursuit of fertility or strength. The concubine experiences every moment of violation, yet she is trained to suppress instinctive recoil. Her suffering is invisible to the court, but meticulously documented in tomes of blood-stained observation. The body becomes a ledger of obedience, the scars a language of survival, the pain a currency paid for temporary favor. Medical experimentation is inseparable from power. Each incision, each herbal injection, each manipulation reinforces hierarchy. The emperor commands life, the physician enforces the command, the concubine obeys, documenting both suffering and compliance. Autonomy is obliterated, even when the procedure promises benefit, enhanced fertility, improved appearance, or longer life. It is inseparable from coercion. Its cost measured in agony and psychological imprint. The aftermath is a ritual in itself. Healing is prescribed according to obedience, rest permitted only for compliance. Physicians return to record pulse, skin color, appetite, and reaction to touch. Attendants note every wince, every tremor. The concubine's body is returned not to her, but to the ledger, a living testament to the palace's dominion. Each surgical intervention becomes a story whispered among the women, a cautionary tale of endurance, obedience, and the fragility of survival. And yet, some concubines endure. They learn to anticipate the instruments, to control reflexes, to internalize agony, and to survive as living proof of the palace's dual promises: beauty and suffering, favor and subjugation, life and permanent subordination. In this empire, surgery is not medicine. It is dominance, ritual, and artistry, combined in the most horrifying form. Flesh is malleable, obedience measurable, and pain inevitable. The palace has turned its women into laboratories, their bodies into texts of control, and every surgical experiment into a testament of absolute authority. Survival is temporary, submission permanent, and the concubine learns that in this empire, the line between healing and horror exists only where the emperor decrees it. The palace is alive with eyes that are never seen. Corridors, chambers, and alcoves are lined not with tapestries of beauty, but with silent observers, attendants, eunuchs, physicians, and informants, whose only task is to watch, record, and report. In this world, privacy is a myth, and freedom is measured by invisibility. The concubine quickly learns that every glance, every gesture, every breath is cataloged for evaluation, compliance, and control. Her body is never hers. It is under constant scrutiny, a ledger of obedience written in posture, expression, and endurance. Even the most mundane routines are monitored. When a concubine bathes, attendants note the clarity of skin, the temperature of water, the relaxation of muscles. When she sleeps, her breathing is measured, her pulse recorded. Every cough, sigh, or shiver is interpreted, each reaction a potential warning sign or commendation. Mirrors multiply observation, reflecting the concubine back to herself and to invisible overseers. She learns to anticipate judgment before it is passed, to calibrate every movement, every glance, every whisper of emotion. Autonomy becomes a reflex. Survival is measured in compliance. The emperor's surveillance extends beyond physical observation. Secret reports arrive daily, detailing weight, appetite, menstrual cycles, and subtle shifts in posture or expression. Physicians, often complicit in both healing and monitoring, act as extensions of this system. Herbs and tonics are administered not only for health, but for control, their effects observed, recorded, and compared. Disobedience, be it a slight hesitation, a falter in attention, or a misalignment of posture, triggers documentation, disciplinary action, or both. Every concubine becomes a subject under continuous scientific and political evaluation. Even intimacy is under watchful scrutiny. Encounters with the emperor, while personal in theory, are carefully orchestrated and observed. The concubine is evaluated for compliance, responsiveness, and endurance. Pleasure is quantified, fatigue noted, and submission measured. Failure to perform, hesitation, or complaint is never private. It is interpreted as weakness, disloyalty, or imperfection. The body becomes an instrument of political utility, and every gesture is an indicator of loyalty to the throne. Children born in the palace are not exempt from surveillance. From the moment of conception, every movement, every heartbeat, every response is tracked. Growth, health, and behavior are meticulously documented, not for nurture, but for assessment of value, utility, and potential future roles. The concubine's womb is thus a controlled laboratory, her offspring a continuation of the empire's demand for measurable perfection. Every deviation from expected norms is noted, every symptom recorded, and every anomaly investigated with clinical precision. Punishment and reward are intertwined with observation. Attendants and physicians wield authority subtly. A glare, a whispered report, or a shift in procedure can determine whether a concubine receives relief, privilege, or pain. Compliance is temporary grace. Surveillance ensures it is never permanent. Women internalize observation as instinct. Anxiety becomes muscle memory, posture a daily rehearsal, and obedience a performance with no exit. Survival is not granted, it is earned through flawless, silent compliance. The psychological toll is immense. Concubines develop hyper-awareness, interpreting every sound, shadow, and expression as potential judgment. Paranoia is normalized, fear internalized, and the self fragmented into observer and observed. Individual identity erodes under constant assessment. The body becomes a reflection of expectation, the mind a ledger of surveillance, and the spirit a measured asset in the palace economy of obedience. Yet even within this oppression, adaptation emerges. Concubines learn to predict observation, to anticipate scrutiny, and to survive under the omnipresent gaze. Every tremor, blink, or adjustment of posture is rehearsed, calibrated, and executed for minimal attention. They become experts in appearing invisible while enduring the invisible. Surveillance becomes both tool of subjugation and metric of survival, a perpetual reminder that in this empire, autonomy is never given, only negotiated. The palace transforms its inhabitants into perpetual subjects, their bodies catalogued, their actions assessed, their existence continuously recorded. Observation is a weapon, control is absolute, and obedience is inseparable from survival. In the imperial court, the concubine learns a truth as unyielding as stone. Every heartbeat is measured, every gesture noted, and every life subordinated to the unblinking eyes of power. Here, in the corridors of gold and shadow, Privacy is extinguished. Autonomy is a myth. And the surveillance state is the most precise instrument of control ever conceived. The palace does not wait for childhood to end. From the moment girls are chosen, sometimes as young as 8 or 9, their lives are mapped, measured, and stripped of innocence. They are prized not for laughter, curiosity, or play, but for potential. Potential to serve, to please, to endure, and to produce heirs. Childhood is not a time of learning. It is a training ground, where every lesson is physical, every correction exacting, and every smile optional. These girls are instruments, forged in a crucible of control. Education is not books or storytelling. It is posture, speech, and obedience. Girls learn to walk with precision, to hold their gaze in subservience, to modulate their voice, even their emotions. Failures are noted meticulously. A stumble, a tremor, a hesitation, all are catalogued and corrected. Punishments are swift and tailored to imprint compliance on flesh and spirit alike. Floggings, confinement, and exhausting chores become the metrics by which endurance is measured. Pain is both teacher and lesson, and obedience is survival. Physical transformation begins early. Herbs are administered to suppress growth or alter curves. Oils and poultices harden skin, smooth features, or cause lasting burns and rashes. Measurements are taken constantly: waist, chest, limbs, posture, compared against ideals dictated by the emperor and his court. Those who fail to conform face harsher routines, stricter punishments, and endless reminders. Their value is conditional, their bodies not their own. Fear becomes instinct, pain, routine. Even the youngest girls are drawn into reproductive surveillance. Physicians track menstruation with clinical precision, noting every irregularity. Some are administered contraceptives or abortive concoctions under the guise of health, ensuring the palace maintains total control. Their bodies are laboratories, each reaction recorded. Confusion, terror, helplessness, they are normalized. Obedience is survival. Resistance is punished. Psychological torment runs parallel to physical control. Girls are isolated from family, stripped of identity, and thrust into competition with peers. Alliances are discouraged, jealousy encouraged. They are taught that worth is measured by endurance, compliance, and favor from the emperor and attendants. Anxiety becomes muscle memory. Insecurity, a tool of domination. Children learn to hide protest, to mask tears, and perform obedience as a method of survival. Identity fractures, leaving only compliance as a stable truth. Some girls endure repeated medical interventions before maturity. Experimental treatments, herbal regimens, and manipulations are applied to correct flaws or enhance features, often leaving permanent damage. The body becomes both lesson and punishment. Compliance earns temporary reprieve. Resistance brings injury. Every reaction is recorded, every scar catalogued. Endurance is compulsory. Death shadows these young lives. Illness, malnutrition, complications from treatments, or mismanaged experimentation claim children before adolescence. Some vanish into isolation chambers, never to be seen again, recorded only as statistical footnotes. Others survive, but emerge permanently altered, bodies scarred, minds fragmented, futures defined by obedience and endurance. Each loss is a reminder. Life in the palace is conditional. Childhood is a privilege rarely granted. Yet, the girls adapt in secret. Whispered instructions to peers, subtle posture adjustments, careful memorization of routines, small acts of agency in a system designed to erase choice. Though they cannot reclaim innocence, these measures allow survival. In the palace, survival is the only education that matters, and even the youngest must master it early. Childhood here is a battlefield. Bodies are tools, minds are molded for obedience, and every day is a test. Girls enter as children and emerge as concubines, attendants, or casualties, their lives marked indelibly by the palace's machinery of control. Every punishment, every observation, every ritual shapes them into instruments of power, teaching a brutal truth. Youth is expendable, and life itself is subordinate to authority. And yet, for every girl broken by the palace, there exists a whisper of resilience, A fleeting glance exchanged with a peer, a hidden gesture of defiance, a small private act of self-assertion. These fragments of humanity are never recorded in the official ledgers, never acknowledged in the emperor's meticulous archives. Yet they endure. They are proof that even under relentless surveillance, ceaseless punishment, and constant fear, the human spirit can persist. Survival here is no longer innocence. It is cunning, careful endurance, quiet rebellion, and the ability to preserve one's sense of self lived in the shadows of gilded walls. Step into the palace's inner sanctum, where incense curls like smoke over marble floors, and the chants of priests echo through gilded halls. Here, medicine is not merely science, nor is religion simply belief. They are entwined into a single, merciless system of control. Every herb, every incision, every potion is both a treatment and a ritual, a demonstration of divine authority over flesh. In this empire, healing and holiness are inseparable, and the emperor's concubines are the unwilling vessels in which these forces meet. Physicians are not merely doctors, they are intermediaries of the sacred. Their training combines anatomical knowledge with ritual precision. Pulse readings are accompanied by whispered incantations. Treatments are administered with prayer, and failures are interpreted as spiritual imbalance. A fever is not illness, it is a sign of moral weakness, an imbalance in the body's sacred humors, and by extension, a warning from the gods. In this system, no ailment is private. Every symptom carries a cosmic significance. Rituals dominate the medical process. Bloodletting, often disguised as purification, is performed while chanting sacred verses. Each cut is precise. Each drop collected and examined not just for health but for spiritual resonance. Herbs are ground with ceremonial care, and potions are blessed before ingestion. These are not treatments born from compassion, they are instruments of obedience, control, and hierarchy. A concubine's body becomes a stage on which medicine, religion, and authority are performed in tandem, and compliance is rewarded with temporary reprieve, while dissent invites punishment framed as divine correction. Pregnancy, illness, and even menstrual cycles are interpreted through this dual lens. Physicians monitor ovulation not merely to ensure heirs, but to align conception with auspicious religious dates. Miscarriages are treated as both medical failure and spiritual offense, prompting rituals designed to appease unseen forces. Contraception, abortion, and fertility treatments are conducted with ceremonial precision, incense burned, prayers recited, and offerings made to ensure compliance. The concubine's body is a vessel through which cosmic order is enforced, where suffering is both prescription and penance. Sacred texts dictate much of this practice. Manuals detail not just medicinal recipes, but spiritual correspondences. Which herb aligns with which star? Which incision cleanses sin as much as blood? Which potion preserves beauty while appeasing divine wrath? The concubines are indoctrinated early. Their pain is holy, their obedience sacred, their endurance a pathway to spiritual favor, or at least the illusion of it. The palace itself becomes a temple of controlled suffering, where walls, floors, and chambers are arranged to reinforce the omnipresence of divine authority. Even seemingly mundane procedures are loaded with religious weight. Massage becomes ritual. Bathing is purification. The slightest failure, hesitation, grimace, flinch is interpreted as defiance of cosmic law. Physicians and priests work in tandem, ensuring that medicine is never neutral, never gentle. It is an instrument of hierarchy. The emperor channels divine will, physicians enforce it on flesh, and concubines bear it silently, their bodies both canvas and evidence of obedience. This fusion of faith and medicine magnifies the horror. Pain is sanctified, suffering is codified, and compliance is worship. Even resistance becomes heresy, an affront not just to authority but to divine order itself. The concubines learn early that health is never personal, autonomy is illusionary, and survival is inseparable from piety. Every heartbeat, every pulse, every measured breath becomes a religious and medical performance, a demonstration that the emperor's control extends from the body to the spirit. And yet, there is a cruel brilliance to this system. By intertwining medicine with religion, the palace ensures that defiance is unthinkable, not merely punished. Fear of death is replaced with fear of spiritual corruption. Pain becomes meaningful, suffering sacred, and compliance eternal. The concubine's endurance is not just survival, it is devotion, a living testament to the empire's ability to dominate both body and soul. In the end, the intersection of religion and medicine is a theater of control. Each procedure, each ritual, each whispered prayer serves to reinforce the emperor's omnipotence. The concubines are not merely patients or servants, they are sacrificial instruments, living embodiments of obedience, submission, and the terrifying fusion of faith and science. In this palace, divinity and diagnosis are inseparable, and suffering is always sacred. Step into the shadowed halls of the palace, where pain is neither accidental nor cruel without reason. It is a ritual, a language, a method of control as precise as any decree from the emperor. In this world, agony is sanctified. Every lash, every pinch, every contortion of the body is performed according to rules, rhythms, and ceremonies. For the concubines, pain is not punishment alone. It is a sacred performance, a daily liturgy of obedience. Morning begins with the subtle orchestration of discomfort. Attendants administer exercises designed to strain muscles beyond natural limits, postures that produce elegance at the cost of bone and tendon. Skin is scrubbed, stretched, and treated with caustic substances that sting and blister. Hair is pulled and pinned, fingers and toes constrained in rituals meant to refine form. Each act is precise, timed, measured. Pain is transformed into art, and endurance into devotion. Punishments are no longer sporadic. They are scheduled, ceremonial, and ritualized. A minor failure in posture or gait may summon floggings, burns, or confinement, conducted with meticulous attention to technique. The concubine learns to anticipate each corrective act, to internalize it, to make submission instinctive. Pain becomes predictable, but that predictability does not lessen its terror. On the contrary, the daily expectation of suffering trains the mind and body into perpetual vigilance. Even pleasure is subordinated to ritualized pain. Baths are designed to punish as much as cleanse. Exercises, stretches, and dances are simultaneously demonstration and torment. The body is continuously refined through suffering, a laboratory in which physical perfection and psychological control are inseparable. Attendants monitor reactions with precision, cataloging flinches, hesitations, and expressions of discomfort, transforming agony into data, endurance into measurable virtue. Medical procedures are interwoven with ritual. Herbs, salves, and ointments are applied under ceremony. Each burn, each blister, each injection is accompanied by chants, gestures, or prayers. The concubine learns early that suffering is both sacred and necessary. To resist is to invite not only punishment, but spiritual condemnation. Pain becomes obedience made tangible. Ritual becomes domination rendered visible. Even the most intimate acts are not free from this framework. Sleeping arrangements, grooming, and meals are calculated to maximize endurance. Attendants observe constantly, recording not only compliance, but the subtle physical toll taken. Fatigue, discomfort, and injury are expected, documented, and woven into the grand performance of obedience. The concubine's entire existence becomes a cycle in which pain signals loyalty, endurance demonstrates devotion, and survival is itself a measure of spiritual favor. The psychological impact is profound. Anxiety, fear, and hyper-awareness are cultivated deliberately. Mirrors and observation points create constant self-surveillance. The concubine studies her own reactions, learning to anticipate ritualized punishment, internalizing the court's expectations. Pain becomes a tool of mind as well as body, conditioning the intellect, shaping thought, and eroding autonomy. Every action, every breath, every subtle gesture is evaluated, catalogued, and corrected. Obedience is the ultimate ritual, and agony its medium. The fusion of ritual and suffering reinforces hierarchy. The emperor's authority extends beyond decree to the marrow of the concubine's bones. Physicians, attendants, and priests operate in coordination, ensuring that every act of pain serves both utility and spectacle. Compliance is codified. Endurance is ceremonial. Rebellion becomes not just dangerous, but unthinkable. Pain is not random cruelty. It is law, religion, and governance intertwined, delivered with precision, and internalized as destiny. And yet, amid the suffering, subtle acts of resilience persist. A glance shared, a posture held despite exhaustion, a hidden breath of defiance. These fragments of self remain, muted, invisible, yet profoundly human. The ritual of pain seeks to dominate body and spirit, yet the concubines endure, silently resisting, surviving, and asserting the faintest traces of autonomy in a system designed to erase it. In this palace, pain is not an aberration, it is a rite. It is instruction, domination, worship, and spectacle, simultaneously physical, psychological, and spiritual. The concubine's body is both altar and instrument. Every injury a testament to obedience, every grimace a lesson in survival. Endurance is sanctified, suffering ritualized, and identity forged in shadows. In the empire's inner sanctum, pain is the language of power, and every woman must learn it fluently, for to speak otherwise is unthinkable. Historians thought they knew the boundaries of human endurance until they stumbled across evidence that forced them to reconsider everything. Buried in imperial archives, sealed tombs, and forgotten laboratories were cases so extreme, so systematically cruel, that even the most jaded scholars recoiled. These are not myths, not exaggerations for sensational effect. They are meticulously documented realities, accounts of bodies and minds pushed to their absolute limits, preserved in the cold clinical prose of official records. One case involves a concubine known only as Lady X. Introduced to the palace at 12, her body was deemed unsuitable for immediate service, yet her youth and potential made her too valuable to discard. Physicians and attendants devised a program of enhancement and endurance that lasted nearly 5 years. Every day involved rigorous physical manipulation, stretching, binding, scarification, and herbal treatments designed to reshape her features and body into the emperor's ideal. Pain was constant, measured, and catalogued. Every flinch, every cry, every sign of resistance was noted. The objective was not only perfection but submission, the complete erasure of her own will. By the time Lady X was summoned to the emperor's quarters, her body had been rewritten, her autonomy erased, and her mind conditioned to obey without question. Another case, preserved in the footnotes of the imperial medical codices, details the treatment of twins born to a concubine whose fertility was prized. One twin was assigned to court service, the other deliberately kept in isolation, subjected to experimental regimens meant to enhance growth and obedience. Daily records reveal hours of herbal treatments, forced postures, and ritualized physical examinations. The surviving twin emerged physically perfect, psychologically scarred, and entirely dependent. The twin kept in isolation suffered repeated organ failure, chronic pain, and what modern psychologists would call severe trauma-induced dissociation. Scholars who first reviewed these records were so disturbed by the systematic cruelty that many refused to publish, fearing backlash from both moral authorities and academic peers. Perhaps the most notorious case involves a concubine whose reproductive cycle was treated as an instrument of empire. From the moment her first menstruation was recorded, her body was monitored with relentless precision. Fertility-enhancing herbs alternated with abortive concoctions, depending on political whims, while physicians tested new treatments for efficiency and safety defined solely by survival, not comfort. When she resisted or faltered, punishments were applied immediately. Floggings, enforced postures, ritualized exhaustion. The concubine's life became a ledger of cycles, treatments, and interventions. By her 18th year, she had endured nearly a decade of medical experimentation, her body and spirit reduced to instruments of dynastic control. Foreign diplomats who witnessed these extremes described disbelief. Some claimed the palace's practices were exaggerated or propagandistic. Others whispered that imperial records themselves were edited to sanitize the full horror. Yet archaeological corroboration, tombs, hidden chambers, anatomical sketches, and herbal compendia confirmed the stories. The empire had created a system in which human lives were both property and research subject, endurance a prerequisite for survival, and pain a codified ritual. These cases shattered assumptions about historical societies. They revealed a culture in which hierarchy was enforced not only through decree and punishment, but through systematic, intimate control of bodies and minds. The concubines' experiences were meticulously planned, documented, and perpetuated over decades, leaving traces in archives that Victorian scholars struggled to reconcile with their sanitized narratives of imperial grandeur. For modern historians, the challenge is not only deciphering the facts, but confronting the psychological implications. How could a civilization normalize decades of deliberate, ritualized suffering? How could entire generations endure pain as obedience, pleasure as performance, and childhood as training for subjugation? These cases are more than anomalies. They are evidence of an empire structured around domination so total that even the human spirit had to find ways to survive in silence. The legacy is unsettling. Every document, every anatomical note, every hidden chamber is a reminder that historical power could extend into flesh itself, transforming bodies into instruments of policy and ritual. Scholars continue to uncover new cases, each more harrowing than the last, proving that the cruelty of the empire was neither sporadic nor incidental. It was deliberate, systematic, and absolute. And so, these cases endure not just as records, but as warnings. They reveal the terrifying possibilities when authority claims ownership of both. Even in a palace defined by absolute control, whispers of defiance seeped through the gilded walls. Rebellion was rare, risky, and often fatal, but it existed. The concubines, attendants, and even some junior physicians found ways to resist the empire's machinery. In gestures so subtle, they left no trace in official records. A glance held too long, a posture slightly incorrect, a ritual performed imperfectly, each small act was a flicker of autonomy in a world designed to erase it. Resistance was never public. It was survival disguised as obedience, cunning cloaked in compliance. Some concubines developed networks of secret communication. Hidden notes, coded gestures, and whispered instructions allowed knowledge to travel across chambers and floors. They shared information about harmful herbs, brutal treatments, and the schedules of punitive rituals. Awareness became armor. Girls and women learned to anticipate interventions, to feign illness, or to pretend compliance when it suited survival. These acts were perilous. Discovery could mean immediate punishment, isolation, or death. Yet, for those who mastered the subtle art of resistance, even temporary reprieve was a taste of freedom. Physical escape was nearly impossible. Corridors were monitored by attendants, chambers reinforced, and courtyards patrolled with constant vigilance. But ingenuity found cracks in the system. Attendants sympathetic to suffering occasionally smuggled food, herbs, or messages to those in isolation. Physicians, bound by duty yet aware of cruelty, sometimes falsified records or delayed harmful procedures. Even small interventions could mean the difference between life and death. These fleeting acts of rebellion were invisible to the emperor's eyes, but monumental to those who survived them. Some concubines staged audacious forms of defiance within their allotted duties. A meal skipped, a ritual delayed, a posture intentionally imperfect. These gestures risked punishment, but also demonstrated agency. Pain became both tool and shield. Endurance turned into subtle protest. For the emperor's spies and enforcers, such acts were often imperceptible. For the women themselves, they were declarations of existence, proof that even within total domination, the human spirit could endure. Escape attempts were few, but remarkable. Historical records, fragmented and scattered across hidden archives, document instances where concubines or attendants fled under cover of night. One famous case describes a group of young girls who navigated underground passages beneath the palace, guided by sympathetic servants and knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Many were caught, punished, or killed, but a handful survived, disappearing into distant provinces, their stories preserved only in whispers and coded notations. Their defiance, though incomplete, inspired a culture of quiet resistance within the palace walls. Resistance also took subtler forms in the medical and religious spheres. Physicians sometimes delayed invasive treatments, altered herbal dosages, or administered remedies that mitigated suffering. Religious rituals were occasionally performed with errors subtle enough to escape punishment, yet enough to disrupt the emperor's control. These micro-rebellions reveal that even the most rigid hierarchies cannot fully suppress human agency. Within a system designed to mold bodies, enforce obedience, and erase autonomy, small acts of defiance became radical assertions of identity. Psychologically, rebellion manifested as resilience. Concubines learned to dissociate during brutal procedures, creating internal spaces where thoughts, memories, and selfhood remained untouched. Whispered games, memorized stories, and secret conversations preserved fragments of childhood and identity. Even under relentless surveillance, the mind could carve spaces of freedom, internal kingdoms inaccessible to the emperor or his enforcers. These acts of resistance, however small or fleeting, challenged the assumption that control was total. They reveal a hidden history of defiance, a network of survival strategies that historians are only beginning to reconstruct. The palace may have sought to dominate bodies and minds, but it never fully conquered the spirit. And so, rebellion in the imperial court was a constant shadow, clandestine, fragile, and dangerous, yet impossibly persistent. It demonstrates that even in an empire built on fear, obedience, and violence, the human spirit can find cracks to survive, to endure, and occasionally to escape. These stories are not celebrated in official records, they are whispered legacies, proof that control, no matter how absolute, can never fully extinguish resistance. When the emperor's reign ended, the palace did not immediately crumble, but its machinery of control left scars that would endure for generations. The walls, corridors, and chambers still held the echoes of obedience, enforced through pain, pleasure, and ritual. Those who survived concubines, attendants, physicians, even the few children spared, emerged into a world that no longer demanded their perfection, yet could not erase the conditioning ingrained into their bodies and minds. Freedom arrived like a distant rumor, welcomed, yes, but terrifying in its unfamiliarity. Survivors were not merely traumatized, they were trained instruments. Muscles remembered bindings, bones remembered corsets, minds remembered submission. Simple choices, once taken for granted, became paralyzing. Which path to walk, which gesture to make, which word to speak without inviting scrutiny or disaster. Autonomy, previously unthinkable, now demanded courage that the palace had deliberately suppressed. Many who left its walls were physically healthy, but emotionally fragmented, their spirits marred by years of ritualized domination. Medical legacies lingered in bodies. Women bore scars from scarification, bruises from punishment, internal injuries from experimental procedures, and complications from herbal interventions. Fertility, once a tool of power, was altered in unpredictable ways. Some could never conceive, others carried reproductive trauma that echoed for the rest of their lives. Even those who survived childhood interventions found that the palace's manipulations had rewritten their biological and psychological narratives. Healing was not simple, it required time, courage, and a willingness to reclaim agency from decades of institutionalized control. Psychologically, the after effects were profound. Anxiety, ingrained from constant surveillance, persisted long after physical threats had vanished. Obedience remained muscle memory. Fear remained a reflex. Survivors struggled to navigate ordinary life, to rebuild a sense of identity erased by constant evaluation. Relationships were fraught, trust fragile. Many learned to mask emotions as carefully outside the palace as they had within it, performing civility to avoid conflict or punishment. Emotional scars were invisible, yet no less real than the burns and bruises recorded in imperial ledgers. Some attempted to resist history's erasure by preserving memory. They shared stories with younger generations, whispered warnings about authority, or created coded records of palace life. These fragmented testimonies formed a shadow archive, a history that official chronicles ignored or actively suppressed. For the world outside, the palace had become legend glorious, terrifying, or exotic, but survivors knew the truth. Power had been exercised through systemic abuse, and obedience had been bought with suffering. Economic and social reintegration was equally fraught. Former concubines, attendants, and medical staff were often stigmatized or feared. Communities were uncertain how to absorb individuals who had been both privileged and victimized, whose bodies had been shaped for performance, whose minds had been trained to obey. Some found refuge in service, quietly leveraging skills learned in the palace ceremony, etiquette, artistry, but at tremendous personal cost. Others withdrew, haunted by memories of abuse, ritual, and control that refused to fade. Political consequences of the palace's collapse were also severe. Dynastic plans were disrupted. Heirs raised under rigid surveillance were unprepared for genuine autonomy or decision-making. Networks of influence once maintained through fear dissolved, leaving power vacuums that sparked conflict. In the aftermath, the emperor's obsession with control left a society grappling with trauma, disruption, and the consequences of decades of absolute authority. Yet even in the shadow of devastation, resilience persisted. Some survivors rebuilt lives, asserting autonomy over bodies and decisions for the first time. Communities, though shaken, slowly adapted to the absence of the palace's rigid hierarchy. Stories passed quietly from generation to generation, creating a collective memory of endurance and survival. In the aftermath, the human spirit proved stubborn, capable of healing, adaptation, and quiet resistance, even after decades of systemic domination. The palace may have attempted to shape bodies, minds, and fates, but it could not extinguish memory, ingenuity, or survival instinct. Pain endured within its walls became a testament to human resilience. The after-effects of absolute control are long-lasting, but the lessons for those who survived were clear. Obedience is not submission, endurance is not surrender, and even the most meticulously constructed empire cannot completely destroy the human spirit. In this empire's wake, silence spoke volumes. Survivors carried stories in their bodies, memories in their minds, and defiance in their hearts. The palace may have ruled life itself, but after its fall, the traces of suffering became a map for survival, for recovery, and for the enduring power of human resilience. The palace has long crumbled, yet its secrets remain, buried beneath layers of stone, dust, and deliberate erasure. Archaeologists tread carefully through corridors that once echoed with obedience and suffering, uncovering fragments of a life that was meticulously hidden from the world. Murals faded with age, fragments of papyri, and the occasional artifact hint at practices that were once public, yet have been concealed for centuries. What survives is incomplete, often misinterpreted, but enough to reveal a civilization obsessed with control, ritual, and power. The truth is fragmentary, yet its implications are horrifying. For centuries, scholars and chroniclers ignored or sanitized these discoveries. Explicit depictions were painted over, papyri censored, and instruments of torture or ritual misclassified as simple domestic objects. Victorian archaeologists, scandalized by what they uncovered, often destroyed evidence outright, labeling it obscene or unfit for public knowledge. Museums stored entire collections in secret rooms, accessible only to a select few. Even in modern times, curators have struggled with how or whether to present these materials. The narrative of the palace as a place of splendor, ritual, and power is incomplete without acknowledging the brutality hidden beneath its gilded surface. Yet the evidence is stubborn. Traces of ritualized control remain etched into walls, inscribed in manuscripts, and embedded in the very architecture of the palace. Special chambers reveal spaces designed not for comfort or utility, but for observation, experimentation, and domination. Instruments of pain disguised as tools of beauty, fertility, and healing testify to the dual nature of control, medical and religious, aesthetic and violent. Even fragments of textiles suggest that clothing was used to constrain, to punish, and to enforce obedience, long before any formal record acknowledged these practices. Medical texts hint at systematic experimentation. Recipes for herbal interventions, detailed instructions for surgical procedures, and diagrams of reproductive manipulation demonstrate knowledge wielded as power. The palace was a laboratory where bodies female, male, young, old, were instruments for scientific, political, and religious experimentation. And yet, much of this knowledge was buried intentionally. Instructions and observations were rewritten, lost, or misattributed, leaving historians to reconstruct meaning from half-erased symbols and cryptic notes. The surviving documents suggest a civilization that treated human life as secondary to hierarchy, ritual, and control. Buried in these discoveries are also stories of endurance. The artifacts, papyri, and skeletal remains reveal patterns of trauma, healing, and adaptation. Evidence of scars, fractures, and repeated interventions tells the stories of lives forced into obedience, yet surviving long enough to resist in subtle ways. Some survived experiments, survived reproductive control, survived the manipulation of identity. In the cracks between history and archaeology, faint traces of rebellion, resistance, and endurance persist. These fragments remind us that even the most meticulously controlled empire could not fully suppress human will. Some secrets remain tantalizingly out of reach, chambers sealed for millennia, text still undeciphered, and fragments scattered across collections hint at practices more extreme than the record currently allows us to understand. Modern researchers often stumble upon contradictions. A document praising divine ritual alongside evidence of abuse, an instrument once categorized as decorative but clearly functional for coercion, a skull with signs of surgical manipulation yet interpreted as ceremonial. Each discovery forces a reassessment of what historians believed they knew. The act of uncovering these secrets is itself a ritual of patience, precision, and reverence. Every fragment must be documented, every inscription photographed, every trace of pigment analyzed. Yet the process is also a confrontation with horror. Even a fragmentary papyrus or a small piece of ceremonial equipment carries the weight of lives regulated, bodies controlled, and spirits constrained. History may have buried the evidence, but it cannot erase the consequences. In the end, the palace's secrets remind us of the duality of civilization: grandeur intertwined with cruelty, devotion intertwined with domination, ritual intertwined with trauma. The world that emerges from these fragments is neither wholly glorious nor entirely monstrous, but deeply human, capable of beauty, terror, and endurance simultaneously. These secrets, buried by time, demand to be acknowledged, studied, and remembered. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths: that human ingenuity can serve oppression as easily as it serves creation, and that the echoes of power, ritual, and suffering persist long after empires fall. The fragments that survive are silent witnesses, offering lessons about control, resilience, and the human capacity to endure. They are reminders that history is never neutral, and that every gilded corridor, every ritualized practice, every hidden chamber carries stories that cannot be fully erased. The palace may have crumbled, but its shadows linger, whispering truths that time cannot completely bury.